Welcome back to this series of conversations at the Dark Reading News Desk at RSA. It's Terry Sweeney with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Arabella Hallawell, CMO with Mend. Arabella, thanks for joining us at News Desk today.
Thanks, glad to be here.
So application security, of course, is a top priority for both developers and InfoSec professionals alike. What, in your view, are the top three challenges that the AppSec community is up against?
Yeah, so I think the challenges are different for the security teams and the developer teams, but one thing that ties both of them is the problem is definitely getting more difficult. The attack landscape has definitely intensified. We've seen, and it's definitely true this year as it was last year, the threats really have moved to the application layer. It's where the majority of the exploits and the vulnerabilities are now coming from, yet the problem is getting even harder to deal with because it means there's a lot more for the security teams to grapple with, and at the same time the developers are the ones responsible ultimately for making sure vulnerabilities or problems in code are fixed.
These application layer attacks are also among the most dangerous and destructive that we've seen in some time, yes?
Yes. Yeah, so I think that the types of attacks have changed, and I think that there was a watershed moment with Log4j. In many ways, it's reminiscent of, almost a couple of decades ago with some of the mass worms and viruses like Melissa and I Love You, where organizations realized just how vulnerable they were and how difficult it was to clean up. I know for us as an organization, as a company helping customers and those out there, it was very, very obvious that organizations who weren't prepared, who weren't proactive beforehand, are still dealing with the cleanup months from the event.
Right. Talk a bit about how automated remediation for both software composition analysis and static application security testing benefits both developers and InfoSec professionals.
Yeah, so I think it's important to take a step back and talk a little bit about automated remediation and why we as a company think it's so important. And that's because if you look at what's happened in the past couple of decades with application security, most of the focus has really been on detecting, finding the problem, not fixing it. And it's the fixing it that's the hardest part is the problem. And we see that the majority of the time, fewer than 20% of known application vulnerabilities actually get fixed into production. And it's because it's the fixing that's hard. And so what we mean by automated remediation is really putting together a process where developers and security teams have confidence that not only are the right things detected, they're also fixed. And so we have a pretty unique approach around how we do that. So I can go into that in more detail if you want.
Well, I'm curious, when the topic of application security comes up, the common criticism, I'm sure you've heard this 100 times, is it's a drag on productivity, it stifles innovation, it makes us less competitive. I mean, you've heard all of these. How does what we're talking about actually begin to address these common criticisms of AppSec?
Yes, so this is why we actually renamed the company to Mend, to really embody the differentiation and also what we think is the mission of our company, but also for organizations, and that's really to remove some of the burden from the developer of security. So there is an undeniable trade-off, as almost every organization, regardless of vertical, has become a software company. There is an inevitable and real priority to deliver innovative code, and that for the most part is a priority for development and engineering organizations. And so helping developers do security better, do application security better, take the burden away, actually use automation, the promise of automation. That doesn't mean you need developers. Like we know actually developer scarcity and productivity is paramount, but we're really about trying to automate a lot of the manual tasks in terms of, number one, like reducing the attack surface so you can actually do some things proactively to actually take away a lot of the work, and then using technology innovation to basically provide automation. That's the promise of automation. So making manual tasks obviously go away so that people can focus on what's most meaningful to them.
So you mentioned Mend a few minutes ago. Talk about the renaming of the company and why that made sense and some of the timing around it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the company previously was known as White Source Software, and it was really founded around making open source secure, and as well as looking at licensing and compliance issues. And the company absolutely innovated in that space, has been a leader, and really has done a tremendous job accruing, 1,000 customers, including 6 out of 10 of the largest software vendors. But the focus really was on software composition analysis. And as you look at modern software development today, obviously open source and open source components in many ways the bedrock, the foundation. But as we looked at what we wanted to do, particularly around automation, automated remediation, we wanted to do that for all code. So we've gone from open source, we've now focused on software supply chain, infrastructure as code and containers, and then most recently we also provide the same capabilities to Sass, so custom code. So we've gone from really focusing on open source to all code. And why we decided to do the renaming is, it's very much emblematic of a change company. The company has changed in its mission and its promise. And why we chose Mend was, that's what it's all about, is actually helping to fix the problem, and fix the problem not just of the code, but also, as you mentioned before, there has been this polarity between development teams and security teams, and we believe that we can actually help fix that problem. So, we as a company, and as well as internally, are about fixing, mending, and that led to this time.
Arabella, let's close out with your thoughts or predictions about what's ahead for the application security market in the next few years.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. There's probably sort of two big changes that I see coming, and in many ways have already come, and that is the next frontier really is application security. It hasn't been solved. It hasn't been solved in the way that endpoint security has, and network security, where we have antivirus or endpoint that for the vast majority of the time can contain threats, same as the firewall. What we've seen with the application security market is it's still somewhat in its infancy. It's focused on detection, and automation is next. But what's probably most interesting is it's not the security teams that are responsible for doing the fixing, it's the developers. And in many ways that's the unique part. So how do we get the development teams to really sort of change the game? That's I think the next frontier, where development and security do come together, because we haven't seen that in the past couple of decades. So that's sort of trend one. And then trend two is we've seen digital transformation in cloud really has transformed society. Every company, every organization has technology as their bedrock, but we haven't really taken the time to figure out, well, what's in your code? And in the same way that now we're looking at food and figuring out what are the labels on all the food, we really do need to know what's in our code. It can mean the difference between, to be dramatic, but it's true, between life and death, and really the forward progress of society. So I think that next wave of actually people caring a lot more about not just what was this code made from, particularly with cloud where it's built from many different components, but what is its safety? And I still think we're at the infancy there, but in 10 years' time, we all are going to want to know what's in our code the same way that when we look at what we're about to put in our bodies.
Good stuff ahead for application security and for the newly reformed Mend. Arabella, thanks for joining the Dark Reading News Desk today.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you.
We've been talking with Arabella Hallawell of Mend. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.